everyone. My name's Lou Palumbo, and welcome to Between the Lines. As in every discussion we have, we're realizing every day that we're quite contentious in this society today. There's no shortage of issues to discuss, and I want to make everyone mindful of what the purpose and or exercise is with this production. It deals with our children, their future, and ultimately the future of this country. It's quite apparent some of us have taken our eye off the ball, so to speak. I would have to say to you that complicit in that statement are a 24-hour news cycle, some of their journalists, unfortunately more than less, and certainly quite a number of our elected officials. We seem to be so consumed with creating narratives and optics that we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And the divisive rhetoric, the polarization in this country is at an all-time high, and there's absolutely no excuse for it. This whole mentality of power grab is just tearing this country apart. And the exercise with this show is to try to dial it down, make people understand that it's okay that we're different and that we need to find ways that we're going to get along and, so to speak, support each other in our differences. That's how you learn, by experiencing something different than what you're comfortable with. Relax, take your guard down, and absorb. That's what you need to do during this journey. In any case, before I get rolling here, I want to really take a moment to thank our sponsors, Buzzsprout and Instacart. We're going to get into them a little bit later in the show, a little bit more about them, and we're going to explain how you can take advantage of special offers that we set aside for you. What I want to speak about just very briefly is this word agenda. I'm trying to determine what the agenda is of some of our elected officials and ultimately our media. We're well aware they're creating your optic. I am very concerned that there seems to be optically a lot of issues that are nagging us today. You cannot miss the price of gas. You're watching it and witnessing it and absorbing the impact of this sudden reemergence of dependency for oil and other resources. I think the border speaks for itself. Interesting expression, a picture worth 1,000 words. The inflation rate is it's going through the roof. Something that left the conversation that I find rather odd is this incident in Cuba about a month ago where people were expressing interest in coming to the United States. And I would say if there's any entity where asylum could be legitimized, it's out of Cuba. We've had a very interesting history with Cuba dating back into the 1950s, where the New York Times printed on its cover Castro, the Robin Hood of Cuba. The mistake the United States made, I believe, in that point was not absorbing it as a territory and possibly even as a state, much the same way we did with Puerto Rico. With that being said, the Cubans seem to have been glossed over. Maybe it's political, maybe it's not. The exercise in this show is not to feed this contentious rhetoric and pick political sides, because I have to be quite candid with you. I have no love for the Democrats nor the Republicans, because I think both of these entities have taken their eye off the ball, as I mentioned earlier in this open. This is about our children, boys and girls, for all of you that aren't connecting the dots. And when you're out there with this rhetoric and this divisive politics and this nonsense in the media, please understand how this translates to our children and the future of this country. I go back to this word agenda. I'm trying to figure out what the agenda is in flooding this country with migrants from pretty much all over the planet. And I go back and I ask this question, which sounds rhetorical, but it really isn't. Citing to you once again that the population since 1970 has grown 135 million approximately. I'm curious to know, does the country have a C of O, a certificate of occupancy, or is it hell-bent on becoming another India or China, billion-plus population? This just doesn't work. We're struggling to take care of the issues at hand. We're struggling to take care of the homeless, the mentally ill, our elderly, shamefully our veterans, and even our children at times. So let's continue to take it on, as they would say. So with that being said, what is the agenda here, ladies and gentlemen? I think everybody needs to put on your thinking cap, use what I say to you as food for thought, and go out and conduct your own little investigations. Isn't very difficult today. All you have to do is turn on this idiot box that they've addicted us to. You can't hide from the picture. It's troubling what's going on here. I don't know what's going on with this presidential administration. I want to be very clear about something. Whether I supported Joe Biden to be president is academic. The minute he became president, I supported him unconditionally, and I was hopeful that he would have a successful administration because that would translate to all of us. That doesn't seem to be the agenda. If you listen to quite a few of the young ladies, for example, in the Democratic Party, Cortez, Tlaib, Omar, Cori Bush, Maxine Waters, but you also have a little bit of undercurrent from the Commerce Secretary, Buttigieg, that somehow saw fit in the middle of a crisis in transportation to take a 2-month paternity leave. I'm not trying to be funny, but I guess he was trying to learn how to breastfeed this child. What were you doing? I'm really struggling to understand why there isn't a level of accountability. And this level of accountability has to translate to both sides of the aisle. No one gets a pass with me, because when we give them a pass, our children pay for it, ultimately, and their future pays for it. So, let's be open-minded. Let's be constructively critical. Better yet, let's start to fix the problems in this country. And I think the first problem we need to address and fix with immediacy is the border issue. I know that earlier in the year, one of our political parties currently in power tried to, I would say, position themselves that there was no crisis at the border. Through divine intervention, though, the Secretary of Homeland Defense, Mayorkas, did go down and realize there is a border. For the people living in the bordering states, and I know some of the agents that work in Border Patrol, I've had the pleasure of working alongside of them in security details in my own business. Ask them, okay? Ask the residents. This is just irreprehensible. And that does not mean we suspend migrants from coming in, but there has to be some method to the madness. Now, clearly, as hard an individual as I've become as a result of my journey, my occupations, and the saturation of stupidity that I've experienced for a very long time, if a woman showed up at the border with a couple of children, you let them in. That's what we're about, But that's not what's happening here. This is a mass rush to your border, and the estimations of numbers are staggering. Long story short, where's the accountability, regardless of the political affiliation? Now, I do understand that we have a certain political mindset that we want to shut the borders. I don't think that's actually what's being said. I think what it lends itself to is the reality of stepping up in stride with the times and tragically understanding we need to cordon this country off. That's a very sad thing to say. But you know what the survival to life is? Being able to stop on a dime and change direction and abandon principles and things that you thought were applicable at one time that no longer are based on circumstance. I hate to tell everybody this, but I'm very well traveled and I paid for it with my civility, truth be told. So I'm looking at the agenda and the agenda and the agenda. I see we have a $3.5 trillion bill that we can't get the Democrats into alignment on thinking, no less the Republicans. We haven't even talked about the Republican pushback. We're too busy attempting to intimidate our elected officials like Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin by following them into bathrooms and showing up at their homes. It is against the law to intimidate an elected official. I believe in the state of Arizona, it's a felony. Was this ever addressed, or did we only address the siege on January 6th? And by the way, didn't some climate people just converge on the Department of the Interior, much in the same fashion, without the brutality, I must be honest, of January 6th? How many sets of rules do we have, folks? The problem with the people running this government is that they are narrow-minded thinkers. They have tunnel vision. Open your brains up and start to understand you must treat everyone the same without impartiality. No one should get a pass because they have a political affiliation with the party in power. I'm going to go back and touch on Tlaib and Omar, two elected officials that unshyingly spewed anti-Semite comments and called for the destruction of Israel and likened this country to the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. without any consequence. You need to be removed from office if you spew hate. We've got enough hate going around. In fact, just to revisit history real quick, wasn't that one of the major complaints we had with Donald Trump? And it was properly rooted. His rhetoric at times was just disturbing. You don't have to fester hate or discord. It's just not appropriate. Oh, wait, that's right. By the way, let's take a look at Maxine Waters, the other party. Interfere, obstruct, don't allow them to exist. Who are we electing today in this country, and why are we sitting back in such a shy manner, afraid to address it? I wouldn't care what political affiliation Maxine Waters was. And let me give you a real chuckle. In 1992, this boy handled her security in Los Angeles. I personally took her through the streets of L.A., up and down La Brea, where the buildings were burned, all through these areas, through Koreatown. She was a councilwoman. She was far more conservative in her language than she is today. You cannot incite the public. Isn't that what we were upset about Donald Trump with? And at times, maybe he did. I'm open-minded about it. But what is there? Only one set of rules rolling around here? You wonder why the country's in divide? One set of rules, blindly applied. That's the end of this discussion with agenda. Put your agendas aside and think about our children, for the love of God. In any case, we're going to move on to the show today. We're gonna speak with one gentleman who's going to call in. I think this is going to be a rather interesting interview. He is from my native land, New York, one of the boroughs, the outer borough, Queens, who relocated, I understand, as a result of the pandemic. So I would like to get this gentleman on the line. And then a little bit later, we're going to talk to a gentleman by the name of Rich Hopkins, referred to sometimes as the king of extreme. He's been 30 years as a stunt coordinator, and he's quite knowledgeable of, I'm just going to say, behavior and standards and protocols on the set. We're going to delve into this matter involving Mr. Baldwin, Alec Baldwin. What went wrong there? Did anything go right? Which is really kind of hard to imagine something did go right. But we're going to delve into a conversation with him and, push along. And I think you're going to find it quite interesting because I've worked on quite a number of movie sets myself. I worked with Steven Seagal, who was just jam-packed with action movies where guns were just as common as the hair on your head. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. But we're going to delve into this incident involving Alec Baldwin. We don't want to speculate or express conjecture. What we really want is a factual, accurate, responsible investigation by the law enforcement agency in New Mexico, and that will really tell ultimately the tale. What Rich is going to be able to do, along with myself, which we seem to have similar experience, is articulate proper handling of firearms in a very general and broad sense, which I think will have some application to the public, as well as on a movie set with protocol in place. So we're going to get to Rich. I look forward to speaking to him very shortly. And we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Instacart, another interesting concept. You can go to your favorite grocery stores, sign on to their application without leaving your home, the comfort of your home. Just pick out the items you'd like. They'll assign a personal shopper for you and deliver them to the point that you would like them delivered to. Another great concept, very user-friendly, and I'll be honest, we use it also. It's very effective, and they're very, very good. They're very on point. We're back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're just waiting for someone to call in. He'll be with us in a moment. If you would indulge us with your patience. We got him calling in right now. Hello? Hello?
Hey, you hear me?
I hear you well. Is this Ryan?
Yeah, how are you?
I was expecting your call, Ryan.
Right on.
Okay, buddy. Let me ask you this. Where are you currently?
I'm currently in Washington State, and I lived in New York for 21 years, and I came out here to be with family right at the beginning of the pandemic, and I make my return on Thursday. And I know you were just there, and obviously you've got a very rich New York history and stuff like that, and I've been hearing kind of mixed reviews, and I'm worried I'm not going to like it there anymore and that the city's changed in a bad way, and I don't know what your thoughts are on that, man.
Yeah. The only thing I'm going to be able to do today, Ryan, is tell you the truth. Okay? The city's in trouble. It has a gigantic deficit. They've done a sterling job of undermining the police and demotivating them. They're pretty much not working. I don't know how else to say it to the public except to tell you the truth that when you call a police officer, if they get to you, they're going to take their time for obvious reasons. You threaten their pension, the financial stability of their families, and sometimes imprisonment. I understand, Ryan, if I may, that you own a home in Queens. Is that correct?
Yeah, I own an apartment in Sunnyside.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Here's the deal. The city's become very random, and by that I mean you can walk out your door and have a sterling there. You could bump into somebody who's mentally ill, or the criminal element that seemed to just be, I would say, navigating the city with impunity, even in Manhattan, Ryan. We just recently locked up teams of guys and driving high-end vehicles that were sitting outside high-end restaurants, casing them and waiting for their guests to leave so they could hold them up.
Wow.
Yeah. There was an incident that culminated down on about 28th Street in the Flatiron District, and some shots were fired, and needless to say, an apprehension took place, and they grabbed a group of individuals doing this. But what I'm really telling you is that on 60th Street, for example, at the restaurant Lava, we had someone, they tried to take his Rolex watch. That's between Madison and Park. It's a high-rent district. Ended up shooting him in his leg because he wouldn't give him the watch. These are not anomalies in the city, and the crime is being underreported. And I'm just going to tell you, you need to be careful. You literally cannot ride the subways with any level of safety. If you go on the subway, you're rolling the dice. Tragically, if you go into New York today as a tourist, you are rolling the dice. Tourism has been adversely affected. I think through 1-2 month period, we shot 4 tourists in the Times Square area, and another 2 were stabbed or slashed on subways. I think you're getting the picture here. The shoplifting is through the roof. They're walking into pharmacies, eateries, high-end clothing stores down in Soho. You're probably familiar with Soho, south of Houston.
Of course.
Princeton, right?
Yeah.
Spring Streets.
Oh,
Walk in and walk out with whatever they want. There seems to be, not just in the city of New York, but universally applied, city by city, no boundaries and no consequences. I'm trying to understand, once again, the agenda here. So I would say to you, go back to New York, but just be guided accordingly. Stay off the subways, be mindful of who's in your environment. And I hate to say this to you, but be careful because, we lived through high crime sprees before, through the 70s and 80s, but there was one major difference.
When you were a cop, right?
Yeah, that's correct. But there's one major difference, Ryan. The police were engaging the criminal element. They are not doing that any longer on the scope or scale that they were. I've been in the city of New York and the borough of Manhattan where the sectors are 1 square block or 2 square blocks and not seen a police car for a good part of the day. That's a tell. These young men and women are checked out. They're fearful that no one's going to have their back, and they're right. They are hamstrung by technology. These phones and your cameras in your phones, they're causing you a problem. They're causing the police a problem. They recently got on this bandwagon of putting video devices on the police themselves, which I think is a wonderful tool. It will motivate the police officer to be, I would say, on his best behavior, especially with language, because I'll tell you truthfully, I came from a generation of police officers where they could be disrespectful and agitated towards you, depending on the level of your activity. But they need to use these cameras to their advantage so you can really get an accurate depiction of what's going on in a particular set of circumstances. But they're hamstrung by technology. And we have an entire culture that seems to think you don't need police. We have some of your elected officials saying you don't need police. They're calling for defunding the police. Guess what, Ryan? They can't find people to hire, so you don't have to fund a budget for hiring.
Right.
They can't hire. They tried to get 800 kids on about 4 months ago. They couldn't get 400.
Well, it backfired in Seattle out here.
You think?
Totally.
Seattle, Milwaukee, Minnesota. It's backfiring Portland. It's backfiring everywhere. Now, I want to be 100% candid and truthful, as I always am, as to the best I'm able to because of circumstance. The police needed some reform. I don't think it's so much that the police need to be kinder and gentler. They just need to be more cerebral in what they do and when they speak to people. Let me tell you something. Until you're in the street with people coming at you left, right, and center, threatening your life, don't tell me what it's like to try to survive. Okay, I've been there. I've been there as a little boy, no less as a police officer. So everybody should keep their opinions about what the cops do and don't do. Granted, we don't want them to ever use excessive force, and we are trained and taught not to. It's beaten into our brains. Use only necessary force. The problem is we're dealing with human beings. A lot of police officers, I shouldn't say a lot, I'm going to say some police officers, cannot separate the difference between a personal attack upon them and attack upon the uniform. You should never attack the uniform. The uniform is the authority. You know, we had back in my generation a rather interesting approach to people that attacked the uniform, attacked a police officer. I'm not going to tell you what it was. Try to guess what it was.
Yeah.
Any case, the thing I would say to you, Ryan, is I don't want to discourage you from going back to New York, but I want you to go there cautiously. It's just very random. I would encourage you, do not ride the train systems. I'll tell you something that's going on in the city that I found rather interesting. The vehicular traffic in and out is at an all-time record high because no one wants to take the Long Island Railroad, the Metro North, into Penn Station or Grand Central Station, which have become hubs for the homeless and the mentally ill. That's the truth. Second thing, you can't find parking garages that will take your car because they're filled, probably accommodating those extra vehicles coming into the city as a result of people abandoning mass transit. You getting the picture?
Exactly.
We're in a little bit of a change. We're losing major restaurants. Il Molino on West 3rd Street, Il Postino on East 49th Street, both Palm restaurants, which are institutions, closed.
Chumlee's, for example. Chumlee's is an institution.
Chun-Li is
gone.
also. Did one of them close?
Yeah.
Because there's one on the Upper West Side on 65th, I think.
Yeah, the one down, the original one, 86 Bedford. I think they're done. The term 86 it during Prohibition, like that's practically an institution. I mean, it's like McSorley's old. You know, it's
McSorley's isn't gone, I hope.
No, it's not. It's still there. Yeah, I made sure.
That was an interesting watering hole. But I think you're getting a little bit of the flavor, Ryan, as to what's going on there. Where are you originally from?
I'm originally from Washington State, so I left and went to NYU, and then so they're all still here. So they live out in the middle of the state, so there was an open place I could go be for a year and a half, and I went back to college and all this. So it was a good, but now I'm returning, and I get these emails from my neighbors being like, somebody got stabbed on Stillman Street in broad daylight.
They're having street robberies in broad daylight in Manhattan. Forget Sunnyside.
It's a family neighborhood, Sunnyside. You know it.
I know it well.
And you're like,
The former chief of the Manhattan Detectives is living in Sunnyside as we speak, so I know it well. And you know, I look. You know, the thing is, if you go, you know, just tread lightly. Let me ask you, what's the need in going back? I'm just curious.
Well, I got some kind of freelance work at NYU, like guest teaching and directing a few things. So it's kind of it's job based, you know. And I put it off, believe me. And I had a subletter, and they're gone, and so now I'm just kind of throwing money at this thing and not living in it. You know?
I don't want to advise you as to whether to continue to hold on to it or to sell it.
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking about bailing on it, you know.
I don't know what to say to you in that regard. I just can tell you that the city's in an interesting transition. The thing that's also interesting is that in the real estate market, the prices for studios and one bedrooms are going through the roof in Manhattan. People want those little apartments they can come into on the weekends or when they come in from out of town or something. The larger apartments that house families, they're on the downslide big time because a lot of people went to Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and you're probably familiar with Eastern Long Island, right?
Sure.
The Hamptons, etc.
Oh, you bet.
I heard from a very reliable source that the population in Suffolk County increased over 400,000 from Brooklyn and Queens.
Jeez.
Yeah, and the real estate prices on Long Island are just going through the roof.
Sure.
I have a friend that just bought a house, and in 2 months it went up $120,000 in appraised value based on this exodus that's going on. You know, one of the things that's happening, Ryan, that you need to be aware of is we're losing our tax base. They're estimating the city's about $100 million in the hole, which is kind of what we were doing in the 70s. And, long story short, you lose your tax base, you turn into Detroit. I've said this before.
Right.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but Detroit was the richest city in the United States in the 50s and 60s because of the auto industry and music. You lose your tax base, you're in trouble. And that's kind of what's happening in New York. And I don't know if this is reversible. The thing I know about New York, and I've got to move on here very quickly, and I hate to rush this with you because I think you're entitled to as much time as you like. I think it's economically resilient. I am gravely concerned about the crime problem. We have an attorney general, and this is a fact, suggested we stop doing warrant checks on people because it might cause a confrontation. I don't even know how to respond to that. We have a bail reform, which has basically made a revolving door for violent offenders. We're experiencing it every day, which is also lends itself to the police not being motivated to arrest people because what's the sense? They go back out and they repeat and they repeat and they repeat. So right. I just want to ask you, I want to give you the final word today. So you have any final question or anything, comment you'd like to make?
No, I mean, other than it sounds like I'm, like you said, with less engagement from the police, it sounds like it's like 1982 in New York. But with no one responding, it's this kind of free for all of a sudden, which is very weird. So it's good to know to keep my guard up while I'm there. And I think once I spend a few weeks there, I'll kind of know if I want to.
Yeah, you'll get a feel for the place. Yeah, it's very random. Ryan, I want to thank you for calling in today, and I need to take a break, and I want to thank our sponsors. Oh, it was my pleasure, and don't be shy about calling in. Thanks, buddy. Be well and be safe. We're going to take a quick break. I want to thank our sponsors, Instacart and Buzzsprout, and then I would like to bring in a gentleman, Rich Hopkins. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. So let me tell you a little bit about Buzzsprout. Very interesting concept. Basically, it allows you to set up your own podcast. One of the most advantageous things about using Buzzsprout is it's user-friendly. So I encourage you highly, if your inclination is to create your own podcast, please look into Buzzsprout. And by the way, we use it. Okay, we're back, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to introduce you to you a gentleman I think that you're going to find has a rather interesting background, probably one that is not that commonly known to the public. I would say he represents a very significant support mechanism to the production of a lot of these movies that you see. His name is Rich Hopkins. They've referred to him as the king of extreme. He's had over 30 years as a stunt coordinator in the entertainment business and owns his own stunt and action sports company in Las Vegas called Thrillseekers Unlimited. You probably get an idea. In 2001, he performed the world's first pyrotechnic bungee jump, which means he bungee jumped while he was on fire. He worked closely with an impressive array of celebrities, including back in recently on the film Back Onto the Strip with Wesley Snipes, Kevin Hart, Bill Bellamy, Tiffany Haddish. He's quite an interesting character. You can find out more about him and his business at thrillseekersunlimited.com. Today we're going to talk to Rich about safety and how he performs safety with briefings, educating the crew, and I want to walk through with him in particular this gun safety issue as well as the protocols of guns on sets. And here's what we're looking to accomplish in addition. We want to delve very lightly into this Alec Baldwin incident in New Mexico. We're not going to speculate as to what happened because we factually do not know. But there are some very interesting basics that Rich and I are going to discuss that not only apply to movie sets but to the general public, which is something that should be mandated, and it deals with understanding the first four basic rules in handling firearms, the importance of training, gun safety, and ultimately knowledge into the law. So we're going to be right back, and we're going to bring Mr. Hopkins in 1 second. As promised, ladies and gentlemen, I have with us Rich Hopkins, known as the King of Extreme. 30 years plus as a stuntman coordinator in the entertainment industry. He's got his own company out of Las Vegas called Thrillseekers Unlimited. You can only imagine what that translates to. And he's done something rather interesting, as I mentioned earlier. He performed a bungee jump on fire, which is quite interesting unto itself. So it lends it a little bit to, how much he likes living on the edge. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. So without further ado, I want to get into this. I want to introduce Rich Hopkins. I thank you for joining us today, Rich. And I know the hot topic of discussion for many is this incident with Alec Baldwin. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't really want to speculate or express any conjecture as to what happened legally. You know, I'm a retired law enforcement agent, and it's critically important that the integrity of the investigation be presented so we can know factually what happened as opposed to what we'd like to think happened. But without saying that, I want you to just tell us a little bit about what you do on the set, not so much with stunts, but so much with this firearms issue. Tell us a little bit about the protocol or the educational process you put the cast and crew through.
Oh, okay. First and foremost, I'd like to send my love and prayers to the family, friends, and co-workers of Helena and Joel. I mean, that was completely horrible and probably pretty much avoidable. There's pretty common protocols in dealing with firearms on set. First and foremost, my opinion, and I think that I share the opinion, is like, why would you ever want to have a live round on a film set? Filming and television and all that, it's make-believe. Why would you want something real where you're actually doing, make-believe stuff? So I don't know how that happened, and I'm not going to speculate. Obviously, my phone's been blowing up for 4 or 5 days, asking me to opine on things that I wasn't there. Okay, so I'm not going to fall into the trap of saying, oh, I know what happened, because I don't.
Let me ask you this, though, Rich. Let me ask you this, buddy, if I may. So when you step onto a set, and we've both been in this position, as I told you, I worked with Seagal on a couple of his movies, and I've done some other training and consulting with weapons in general. So when you have a cast and crew on a movie set, what do you say to them, Rich? What do you tell them about this whole firearms issue and handling? What's the instruction you give to them?
Well, first thing, if it's a really weapons-heavy film, you would always take the talent that's going to be using the firearms, and you would have rehearsal practice days, whether it's at a range or somewhere like that, so they're comfortable in dealing with that. On set, I mean, I've heard things where, like, the first AD is supposed to be checking stuff and all that. I've never had a first AD handle a weapon.
I agree with you.
It's either the armor or the stunt coordinator or both. What I do is usually, if I have any type of say-so on who the armor is going to be, it's obviously going to be somebody I know and have worked with, because that way we're familiar with each other. If a new armor comes in that I haven't worked with before, I go up, develop rapport with them, and say, listen, let's both be here double checking each other, because in my opinion, 4 eyes and 2 brains is better than 2 eyes and 1 brain. You're always double checking each other.
Rich, just for the sake of the audience, do me a favor. Give us a description of what an armorer is on a movie set. Give us a definition so the public understands that.
Well, I mean, in film and television, an armorer is the person, their only responsibility is handling the weapons. Okay? What it's doing is, I did a film called Sushi Girl, and we brought probably 20, 25 weapons and probably a couple hundred rounds of blanks and squibs and the whole deal. First of all, when the weapons are loaded, I'm there with them, either helping or supervising. Okay, then when we go to the actors and hand out the weapons, okay, what I do is I open it up, show it to them, pull out the ammo so they can see what's going on, load it. Obviously, we've already had a safety meeting with the entire crew. We've handed out earplugs. We've handed out eye protection anywhere in close proximity. As soon as the take is over and cut is called, we go and instantly grab all the weapons, take them back to the armor station, unload them, clean them if necessary, and then reload them again.
You know, Rich, one thing with this incident, and I've been in this position because I've actually trained people with to shoot, and I start out by telling them the 4 basic rules involved in handling a weapon. Always treat them like they're loaded. Always point them in a safe direction. keep your finger off the trigger, and do not point a weapon at something you do not intend on shooting. Now, interestingly enough, coming out of law enforcement, there are some other rules that apply to us. It has to do with the backdrop of the target. In other words, if there are civilians behind an intended target of ours that's engaged with us in the shooting, it'll keep us from engaging them. But, I start usually with the 4 basic rules. But I got an interesting question, Rich, and I think you're curious about this too. Who handed Mr. Baldwin the weapon? Did he, in fact, inspect the weapon? Who was that person, right? And did he inspect that weapon? You see what I'm saying? That's the first question I'd look to as an investigator to start this up. And I think there's something that the public or the audience needs to be able to explore. And that was, why was Alec Baldwin pointing that weapon in the direction of a camera, a director, or in line with a cinematographer? You see what I'm saying? In other words, my understanding is that doesn't have to happen with these cameras today. You don't have to be standing behind them. Am I correct?
Well, yeah, that would be considered a lock-off shot. Like if there's a shot where you want to be looking right down, you want to see down the barrel of the weapon, ideally you would set up the shot, make sure you have a cold weapon, or even a dummy, like a rubber weapon, okay, just for your eye line. Okay, say instead of shoot right down the barrel of the camera, I'm going to shoot just off to the left. Well, again, speculation, because and these aren't facts yet, I can almost imagine that Helena was looking through the eyepiece of the camera, and usually there's like a little extension monitor, like a little 3.5-inch monitor. And I think D'Souza was behind her looking at the monitor while she was looking in the eyepiece. So the shot went through her and hit him.
It was a through and through, correct?
Just my opinion.
Yeah, that's what I think happened awful. Yeah, I think it was a through and through. One of the things that I'm trying to figure out also, the genre of this movie, I believe, was Western. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And back then they used to use what we call 45 long Colt. That was the cartridge of the day. And these 45, they were Colt 45 single action armies, as you're probably familiar with. So that's not exactly a ballistically terrifying cartridge. It has a rather heavy projectile that travels at a very slow rate of speed, about 800 feet per second. Curious to know how it went through her, depending on what part of the body it struck, and was able to strike the director behind, which is, I think, from a speculation perspective, sounds like it might size up. But I just want to say one thing to you, Rich. As an investigator, the first thing I also want to know is who introduced the ammunition onto that set. That's a very, very important element of this. And how is that ammunition managed? Let's just give them a little slack, Rich, and say they're in New Mexico and they're shooting, say, in a desert, which I'm not sure where they were shooting, to be very candid with you. But they were concerned about game, coyotes, cats, whatever the hell they might be concerned about. Maybe that was an explanation for why they had live ammunition on the set. Not a good one.
No.
But an I know. Listen, I know. No. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here, Rich.
Yeah. No, I just, rule number 1, you don't have live ammo anywhere near.
Is that a universal? Is that a universal as protocol goes on all sets, to the best of your knowledge, Rich?
Well, it is. I mean, I don't know if there's a law. I know there's going to be one after this. It always takes a tragedy to make new rules, and all the unions love to make rule after rule after rule, which is fine. Some people don't have common sense. Like common sense would tell me, even if there isn't a rule, why would you have live rounds on a set?
There's no explanation,
buddy. I know about. Well, first of all, like, say we're filming downtown. I'm in Vegas, so we have all kinds of crazies always wanting to jump in our shot and all that. We have Metro there. We have law enforcement there. They're armed, I can't even fathom how live rounds got into that armor cart or whatever. They shouldn't have been anywhere near there.
Rich, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to further discuss this incident. And again, I want to just tell everyone, not to take anything that Rich and I are saying today and be spoon-fed. This is just food for thought. It is simply speculation. That's all it is. We do not factually know what took place. The integrity of this investigation will tell us exactly what did take place. We're going to be right back. 2 seconds. I do want to thank our sponsors, by the way, Buzzsprout and Instacart. You can find us, by the way, by going to betweenthelines.tv. We are on Spotify. We are on what's the other one? I know we have another one, gentlemen. Apple, Spotify, and Apple. You can also find us on YouTube. We're going to be right back. Thank you for joining us today. We have a very interesting gentleman, Rich Hopkins. We're going to come right back, guys. We are back. And with me is a gentleman who is just dripping in experience of the handling of firearms on movie sets for over 30 years, a stuntman himself, self-employed. He's an entrepreneur, to put it to you politely, a very successful one. And we are in the process of discussing this incident that took place in New Mexico on a shoot with Alec Baldwin, where tragically a cinematographer and a director were, I believe, and this is just my opinion, were accidentally shot. I don't think there was any intent there, but that does not relieve you of responsibility under culpability. But Rich, can I just ask you yourself, what's your background with weapons? Can you give me a little understanding of where you're coming from?
Well, living in Nevada, I actually have my own firearm that I open carry. Okay, so I'm trained and in the use of firearms. I'm a stunt coordinator. I don't consider myself to be an expert in firearms. There's people 10 times more knowledgeable, including yourself, in weapons. I've handled many weapons. I grabbed this. Here's a shot of me actually firing a 45. This is on the set of Impractical Jokers. And again, we went through all the safety protocol and we had a safe shoot. Again, going back to one of the bigger weapons heavy films I did, Sushi Girl, it was, Mark Hamill, Tony Todd, Michael Biehn, Trejo, it was just a blood fest, shootout and all that. And we had a protocol. Skip Burrows and I went through with each of the actors, make sure they were comfortable, make sure everybody on the set knew what was going down and what the procedures were.
I tell you, I want to just briefly talk to you about this incident involving John Eric Hexum, where he was playing Russian roulette, as you're probably aware, back in around the mid-'80s, and he placed a gun to his forehead. Apparently, no one explained to them this concept of muzzle flash, which occurs anytime you have powder in a cartridge, and a lot of these powders are contained therein to the cartridge with wads, which come out at a significant rate of speed and are capable of causing a significant amount of blunt trauma, even if there isn't, adequate penetration. But, there just seems to be overall a lacking in education. And, I go back, and I hate to say this and trivialize, but, you have to just get people on the page of how to properly handle firearms. That you cannot overemphasize the importance of treating guns like they're loaded and pointing them safely, keeping your finger. I mean, these are basic things that they drill into you. But I just want to ask you again, Rich, if I may, just for a little clarification. Don't we have remote cameras where you no longer have to stand behind the camera if you want to really line up into, point the barrel down the nose of the camera? Don't we have these devices, sir?
Yes, there are. And what I think I kind of touched on it, but then we got sidetracked, is you could do what's called a lock-off shot. Okay, so you get everybody in position, you run your rehearsals, you block it and all that. Okay, we're going to shoot down the barrel of the camera. We want to see, down the barrel. Turn the camera on, clear.
Let me ask you this, buddy.
Simple.
You probably heard, as being reported in the media, and I don't know how credible it is, but there was a little bit of undercurrent or some disgruntled crew members who expressed concern over the unsafe environment with guns there. Did you hear any? Is there any credibility to that, to the best of your knowledge, Rich?
I don't know the people directly involved, so I've been hearing and reading what you have as well. But, one thing is, if you get an overzealous, and first of all, I don't know the gentleman who was the first AD, but some of those guys get a little heavy-handed and they intimidate people, and sometimes they step out of what their responsibilities are. So if you have a second AD that's a complete control freak, he may tell the armor, give me the guns and I'll give them to the talent, because they like to have that separation.
Understood.
And it bothers me sometimes when, even if it's not weapons related, but it's, some fall downs, a trip and fall, whatever the stunt is, I have to almost beg or demand to be working one-on-one just because there's that hierarchy pecking order. And I'm just like, well, let's see. If it involves stunts, shouldn't the stunt coordinator be an integral part of that? So I think some of the big name coordinators don't have problems with that. And I'm not one to be pushed around either. I'm not a small guy. So I've actually left sets just like those other people did because safety issues were not being adhered to. And I've told people, I said, look, I've been doing this over 30 years. I'm not about to throw away my career on some shit show, where you have complete disregard for people's safety. I'm too old to start a new profession and I don't want to become a greeter at Walmart. So you can take your show and shove it. And I've left.
Yeah.
So I guess the problem is some people are desperate for the work. They don't mind being walked all over and stuff like that. But I mean, it's not a matter of a power trip to me. We're all supposed to be a team. When it comes right down to it, we're all every crew position from the director down to the PAs, we're all there for the common good of making a picture.
Yeah, we're part of a support mechanism, Rich. All of us are part of a support mechanism. You're right about that. I do want to just comment on one thing that you did bring up. Having both of us worked on movie sets, there are some people that just don't understand their boundaries and how to stay in their wheelhouse, and that's a big problem. But, I would go back and say this, that if an armorer, for example, made that assessment of a first AD or a second AD and realized that they were having problems, I almost said a very naughty word, but you understand what I'm talking about, something about size, that I would make sure that anything being handed to them was safe. Something slipped through the cracks here. I'm hoping that the investigative organization is up to speed on this thing, because this needs to be addressed. I want to ask you this question, Rich. What do you see as future of guns on sets? What do you see is going to happen here?
Well, they're probably going to go to simunitions, airsoft, and CGI everything. I would think a lot of the lower end projects do that anyway. But what bothers me even more than that is, especially here in Vegas, we're a smaller market. So we have a lot of these little indie films and stuff like that where they just go out into an alley off of Industrial and have little shootouts and stuff. Next thing you know, you have the SWAT team showing up.
Right.
It all starts from the producers. Okay, it's up to the producers to vet every position, not just stunts and all that. They should go, hey, what has this guy done? Is this guy qualified to do that? Stunt coordinator, armor, whatever. When I'm being hired onto a show, I normally have to produce my resume, clients, bio, even insurance certificates where I've been bonded and insured. And we're having a big problem here in Vegas, especially as we have with the whole COVID thing, we had a lot of people reinventing themselves. And some people decided, hey, I'm going to reinvent myself as a stunt coordinator. Okay, I'll tell you right now, in this business, you can maybe fake it till you make it in about 80, maybe 90% of the positions. Stunts is not one of them.
Yeah,
okay, so we have a big problem here. We had all these homegrown stunt coordinators that have never actually done stunts themselves out running around, and they're being hired by some of these productions.
Let me ask you this, Rich, if I may.
It's a disaster waiting to happen, man.
Do we know, in fact, there was an armorer on this set?
Yes. Okay, and again,
and do we know who that was? Okay, yes, go ahead, buddy.
Okay, I'm sure, from what I understand, the readings and the reports I've got is that her father is a well-known gunsmith, armorer, even maybe stunt performer. And she apprenticed under her father. I'm pretty good at my due diligence. So when all this broke, my phone and email, everything started blowing up. I think it was Thursday afternoon. I instantly jumped on IMDb Pro. Okay, who's on this? Who's on this? And the young lady that was the armorer has like 3 credits on IMDb. Now, don't get me wrong, IMDb is not the end of all end, but it is a good barometer. Let's see, if you're a producer, are you going to hire an armorer with 3 credits or 300 credits? Right?
Yeah, I have a tendency to agree with you. You know, and again, I don't want anyone to think this is what happened, but I'm just concerned that nepotism might have set in. You know, this whole discussion about safety with guns today not only resonates through movie sets, Rich, but I think it resonates with the public. I don't think anyone supports the Second Amendment, especially understanding the significance of the Second Amendment and why it was the Second Amendment positioned in the first 10, the Bill of Rights. That's how important it was to our founding fathers, and for reasons of good cause. But I just encourage everyone to require themselves to obtain proper safety and handling of firearms, and in addition, to delve into the law so that you may understand use of force issues, especially those involving deadly physical force. So I just want to just touch on this again. You know, maybe part of this being that we're in such a gun-drenched society, Rich, is we need to start to teach children at an earlier age about how to handle them, how to secure them. I'll tell you something interesting, and you'll probably appreciate this. There's always this talk about gun control, of which we've seen not an effort made in this administration after everybody addressed it so vehemently. And I think what everybody's starting to realize is that there is such an overwhelming number of guns in this country that it's unmanageable at this point as far as elimination. Back in early 2019, Rich, I'd read an article in a very credible publication that indicated on the planet there was slightly over 1 billion small arms. That was the terminology, small arms. They said 40% of those were in our country. That's 400 million. I now move ahead. I'm in Ponte Vedra, Florida, July of 2019, and I happen to have on CBS, which is probably one of the few shows I ever watched, because former Commissioner Bratton, who's a friend of mine, his wife, Ricky Kleeman, is an attorney, and she does legal segments, so you understand the connection. They acknowledge roughly 400 million. That's the conservative end. Listen to this part of this discussion, Rich. You're going to find interesting. Last year, there were over 40 million NICS check. A NICS check is an instant criminal background check through the Department of Justice. It's a request to buy at least one firearm. You know what I'm talking about, Rich. You go in, you fill out a 4473, right, sir? And you can buy multiple firearms on one NICS check. There were 5 million new gun buyers last year, which is alarming. That's a lot of people buying guns for the first time. This year, if my stats are correct from DOJ, they had about 40 million in the first 6 months additional, and another 5 million first-time gun buyers. I'm going to go out and verify that because I've mentioned it a couple of times, and I want to make sure I'm spot on. But if you're staying with me with the numbers, Rich, we're not looking at gun control. We need to manage this problem intelligently. I think you'll agree. First and foremost, the mentally ill and emotionally disturbed people, limiting their access. But the education process has to take place. If you listen to my numbers, Rich, we're pushing what we can account for to be about 500 million in this country. You know and I know there ain't no gun laws coming our way. Just isn't the case. We need to start to manage it, and that's through education, I believe, starting with our children and mandating any adult that wants to acquire a firearm that they go through adequate mandated training and education into the law. I think you might agree with that, Rich. Your opinion, sir?
I do agree with that, absolutely. You know, it's like I have friends on both sides of the issue. Obviously, as I said, I open carry here in Nevada, and people ask why. And I'm like, well, watch the news in the evening. Look at all the people that fell victim to people that have illegal guns and they intend to do harm. Okay. So the last thing, you know, I tell my friends that are anti-gun, I say, if a guy's going to rob you and you're looking down the barrel of a gun, and then, you know, right before he pulls the trigger, you're like, wow, if I had a gun, I could at least have a chance. You have no chance. And, you know, there's like tons of bumper stickers, you know, whatever, propaganda and stuff, you know, like guns don't kill people, people kill people.
That's correct.
Like this right here is an inanimate object. If it's sitting on my table, it can do no harm to anybody. Okay. It has to be a person behind it with malintent. So, you know, I would rather protect myself and other people around me, innocent citizens. If I'm in grocery shopping and some guys come blasting in with shotguns, I at least have a chance. I even had a little old lady in the grocery store saw that I had my sidearm with me, and she asked, why do I need that? And I said, if somebody comes blasting through there with shotguns, where are you going to be? And I told her, probably behind me.
Yeah, well, you know what I'm being prompted to close this, Rich, but I just want to continue this conversation with you for another moment. What's going on in our major cities? There's no guessing game. We're in serious trouble in our major cities. The homicide rates, the shootings are skyrocketing. The fact of the matter is that there are less people dying today because the medicine's better. We learned a lot on the battlefield, but the shootings are through the roof. And I hate to mention Walmart, but for some reason, there's a demographic that has it in for Walmart, for example. I don't let my wife go into that store. I go. And I'll tell you something else that's interesting. Post 9/11, I have not left my home without a firearm, period. My concerns are active shooters. I've had a different training mechanism instilled in me, to be very candid with you. We learn things in law enforcement that if you're paying attention will lend itself to your survival rate, and probably that to other people as well, like seeking cover. It's a biggie. People don't seem to understand the importance of it. But, I'll tell you this, you'll find interesting. 1989, I went out to L.A. from New York, Rich. And I had a lot of my clients who were in the entertainment industry wanted me to train them with guns. And back then, I was somewhat reluctant because I will tell you, you have to be of a certain cloth to use this thing. There's a certain emotional attachment to understanding you're going to take somebody's life. If that's not your fiber, don't have a gun, you're going to lose it, they're going to use it on you. I told them, try to sidestep it. Trained a few of them. They got it out of their system. Today, I tragically encourage you to learn how to use firearms. I don't care where you are or what you're doing. You're out on the West Coast, am I correct, in California?
I'm in Las Vegas.
No, but you've been in California is my point, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm from there.
Well, what's interesting is that earthquakes, fire, floods, and riots, you lose all your emergency services pretty much west of the 405. I lived in Malibu and I lived in Manhattan Beach. I came to learn a lot of things about taking care of yourself out there. And I encourage people today that, it's an interesting tool. There are home invasions also more today than ever before. As I mentioned, Rich, you may not have heard me say this, but the population since 1970 increased to 135 million. So have the problems exponentially increased, and that deals with crime. There's a massive systemic failure with managing this society today. It's being evidenced in our major cities. Why people think it's a bad idea to have a firearm is beyond me. I would rather have a firearm than have a car. What's so interesting is, having been in law enforcement, I watch what people do with cars. They treat them like ballistic missiles. What's the difference? If you're of a reckless mindset, you're of a reckless mindset. If you have proper training, like we drive cars, Rich, right? And you're educated as to the law, right, Rich? You now have something that's useful, providing you understand the boundaries that come with it. I have to close. But I do want to ask you to come back, Rich.
Okay.
I'm going to give you the last comment, though, buddy, so go.
Well, okay, my last comment, if we rewind back to the Rust situation, I'll say, first and foremost, I'm not a huge Alec Baldwin fan and his politics and all that, but I do feel bad for the guy. He's going to have to live with that the rest of his life, and everybody else that made those decisions on that fateful day. So my heart goes out to the victims as well as the people that made some mistakes.
You know what I say on that comment, Rich? He's a father. He has children. Okay, and everybody needs to be mindful of that as well, regardless of how you feel about his politics or him personally. I happen to know his brother Billy pretty well. I've met Steve, and I played basketball with his brother Danny. He's a very good athlete. I just tell everybody, pull your horns in and just dial this down. Keep this in context and perspective. This man is a father. He's got children. Let everything you do and say be guided accordingly. As I say to you in the beginning of the show, it's about our kids. Keep that thought in mind when you're out there wanting to bang Alec over the head because you think you got him. This was a tragic incident that more than likely may have ended his career in many aspects. I don't know how you recover from this, but I have to close. I tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, as always, please do not be spoon-fed by me or any of the media outlets, any of them. Go out and do your own research. Go out and become an investigator. It's actually kind of fun. And there are all of these tools at your disposal today, these search engines that can give you information and teach you. I do a lot of research. I do a lot of investigating, which is why I know populations and of cities and crime rates and the number of cops per capita. It's really interesting things because it tells us a lot about our culture and the direction we're going. I want to thank you guys today. I want to thank Buzzsprout. I want to thank Instacart. You can find us on Apple and Spotify. You can find us by going to betweenthelines.tv. I encourage you, please email us or call in. We want you to become part of this conversation, but understand this is about solving problems. I'm not beating anybody over the head. Nothing good comes of that. My name is Lou Palumbo, and this has been Between the Lines.